Hey everybody, my name is Hannah Avison. I'm a member of 100 Percenters. I'm also a songwriter, uh, artist, producer, and I get the honor to be your moderator today for a really important conversation. So getting things started, thank you for coming today to be a part of this conversation. This is the Safe Music Business Panel. I want to start by welcoming our panelists. I'm so excited to have everybody here today. And now I'm going to revert to these notes, but I'll be back and forth. So today we're privileged to host a distinguished panel comprising industry professionals, activists, a mental health expert, and an attorney. Together, we will delve into fostering a secure environment and tackling the prevalent issues of misconduct, harassment, and abuse in the music industry. Your presence in this conversation is invaluable as we strive to promote accountability and cultivate a culture of respect and safety within our industry. Firstly, we have Tiffany Red. Tiffany Red is a Grammy-winning songwriter who has written hits for artists like Zendaya, Jason Derulo, and more. Her outcry over undercompensation for her work on the K-pop hit Boss sparked the 100 Percenters, which advocates for fair pay and the rights of music creators. Her outspoken stance reverberated, drawing attention from notable media outlets like Billboard, Variety, Forbes, and Rolling Stone, and garnered support from Sony Music Publishing. So let's give a round of applause for Miss Tiffany Red. Yay!
Woo, 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 woo. Woo, woo.
Next, we have Alexa Nicholas. Alexa Nicholas, known for her role on the Nickelodeon series Zoe 101, has since become a fierce activist. She founded Eat Predators, a movement dedicated to combating predatory behavior in entertainment. Alexa and supporters of Eat Predators have staged over 30 protests outside major record labels. My Alexa is going off. I'm so sorry.
It happens all the time.
It happens all the time. I have a lot of friends named Alexa or Alexis, and that always wants to be a part of this. At some point, I will probably get up and unplug her because she does not need to be a part of the conversation, just us.
We can't have two Alexas in the room at the same time.
Absolutely not. Okay, and we'll continue on. Alexa and supporters of Eat Predators have staged over 30 protests outside major record labels and film studios demanding accountability and an end to sexual misconduct and abuse in the music industry or in the industry. She can be seen on the HBO Max docuseries Quiet on Set, where she bravely shares her childhood actress experience on Nickelodeon. A round of applause, please, for Alexa. Tyrone A. Blackburn is a passionate plaintiff's attorney known for his dedication to prioritizing the needs of his clients, specializing in employment and discrimination law, sexual assault and harassment, as well as medical malpractice. Mr. Blackburn brings forth his expertise with a relentless pursuit of justice. Notable among his representations are cases against prominent figures such as music mogul Sean Diddy Combs and renowned companies like Airbnb. Thank you so much for being here today. Let's give a round of applause. And last but not least, Sarita Butler. She is a licensed marriage and family therapist, LMFT. She specializes in complex trauma like gun violence recovery, healing from childhood abuse, emotional, verbal, physical, sexual, neglect, post-traumatic stress disorder, and more. She teamed up with record label LVRN in 2020 to launch a mental health arm of the company. Thank you so much for being here. Let's give her a round of applause. Okay, to the fun stuff. Let's get started. Understanding safe and unsafe spaces in the music industry. So I have a question for all of our panelists today. What are some common safety challenges you or your clients have encountered while navigating spaces within the music industry from your perspective? Let's start with Tiffany.
Okay. Common issues. I mean, there's so many. I don't even know which one to start. Which one to start with? I definitely think that there's a lot of libations and drug use in the studio, and I mean, I I'm a stoner, so I'm not gonna sit here and act like I don't go outside and smoke weed, but things tend to get out of control when there is liquor and drugs present. So I think, you know, um, just they're not. I think the common issue is that there really is no like professionalism in like especially in creative spaces. When you're in the studio, it's like, oh, it's all about the vibe, the vibe, the vibe, the vibe, the vibe. Um, and so there leaves a lot of like gray area for misconduct, in my opinion. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think that that is something that is so real. In most other industries, you would never walk into, the room to do business and have liquor or drugs available because it doesn't quite read professional. And it creates a lot of issues. I'd like to take it to Alexa now. Alexa, what are some common safety challenges that you've encountered?
I would say, as someone who wasn't directly in the music industry, but was a victim of someone within the music industry and witnessed how the music industry covered up his crimes for him, I would say, though, what I hear the most about is how HR doesn't necessarily have the people's safety in mind. It usually is there to protect the company and not the survivors, not the people that are working for the company. And so I've seen time and time again that HR is covering up abuses of all kinds and promoting or keeping the predator. And that creates a lot of issues because people then don't know what this person is capable of because it's getting covered up and silenced. And then this person is gaining more and more access to more and more victims. And so I would say there's so many, like Tiffany said, but I would say number one for me is how HR has not been protecting people from abuse, and quite the opposite. They are complicit and covering it up. And more victims come out of that cover up.
100%. That's so real and a really wonderful point. Now, Tyrone, how has this affected your clients?
Oh, how much time do you have? I'm just taking some notes because two great points were made by Alexa and Tiffany. So just to speak off of Tiffany's point, I would like to add the word duress, because in those spaces where you have a lot of drug use and a lot of vibe building or vibe creation, if you have an individual who's literally just there to practice their art and they're not really interested in engaging in all the other activities, they feel this peer pressure to do so. And if they refuse, then they are blacklisted or they are deemed not trustworthy, and they have to acquiesce to the demands of the moment or the room under duress in order to continue on pursuing their dreams and their goals. So that's the first thing. When it comes to what Alexa said concerning duress, concerning human resources, 100% true. So HR is the internal risk for any company, any organization. The name on their checks matches the name on your check. So why would they try to cut their nose to spite their face? They're not going to shoot themselves in the eye in order to protect you from being harmed. All they're there to do is to assess the amount of exposure that the company has to your claims as a result of your claims, I should say, right? So, and I'm going to touch on this a little later. You know, you before you ever go to HR, you need to have a really thick FU file, meaning that the file that you have against them must be thicker than the file that they have against you, because trust and believe they're building one, right? And before you go to HR, you really need to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row, because once you ring that bell, you can't unring it. You put them on alert. Now they're monitoring your emails, they're monitoring your phone calls, they're watching what you print, what you fax, what you email, they're monitoring everything. So don't go to them unless you're ready for the fight.
Absolutely. Really interesting point about not biting, or them feeling that not bite the hand that feeds you kind of concept, and showing up with all of those ducks in a row. Finally, I'd like to direct this question to Sarita. What are your thoughts here?
So, from a mental health point of view, I think I can kind of touch on all of these points, especially the ones that Tiffany and Alexa shared. When you are deemed a person or get the marker of a person who is not a part of the vibe creation or that goes against what it takes to be in the space, um, there is a blacklisting that happens, and people feel that, artists feel that. I work primarily with artists both in music and in television and film, and I often hear how I went into a space and I wasn't down for the tomfoolery and the shenanigans that were a part of the session, and either being asked to leave or being berated, or being told that their art and their skill wasn't up to par, or that they weren't needed for the project anymore. So there is um, this backlash that happens when a person does not feel comfortable or is, as Tyrone said, is under duress or feels under duress in these settings. So it's funny because when the therapist comes into the studio, because I've done therapy everywhere. I've done therapy from the studio to the strip club, literally. And understanding that there are different levels of sessions. There isn't, there's the sessions that the streaming platforms come to, or the sessions, and everyone is kind of on their best behavior, and then there's the more creative sessions where there's all kind of things that are happening, from drugs to sexual assault to all of the above. So I think that we need to really talk about the different complexions of how people show up, because people are smart. They're not going to give you, I'm a predator out the gate. They're going to see how much you can take before they start to show you who they are.
Absolutely. My next question is for Tyrone. Can you provide us with an overview of the critical workspace safety laws and regulations that apply to the music industry?
Well, there's no specific set of laws that are just relegated specifically to the music industry. These are just laws that cover all industries, right? And so for one, you have Title VII, which is the federal statute that is kind of like regulated by the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. And under Title VII, it covers race discrimination, discrimination based on color, religion, sex, and national origin. Then you have a sister statute that deals with disability under the Americans with Disabilities Act, right? That's also governed by the EEOC. And then you have state-specific statutes, right? So I'm gonna talk about New York and New Jersey, because that's where I'm at. And in New York, you have the New York Human Rights Law, which governs very similar areas: race, color, religion, sex, national origin. But then you add on their marital status, sexual orientation, right? So New York City is more liberal, so they'll add additional things, right? Then New York City has a statute that is the New York City Human Rights Law, which is even more liberal than the state and federal statute, which adds other areas, like if you were previously incarcerated, you can't be discriminated against because of that, right? And then it goes on and on and on, right? So those are the, I guess, the non-discrimination type of claims, statutes and regulations. And then you have the ones dealing with compensation, right? Because what I've learned from working in this space, dealing with artists and entertainers and producers and writers, you people don't get paid your money, right? And folks tend to, again, duress, extortion, right? These seems to be, the name of the game when it comes to the music entertainment industry. And that is, I'm in a position of power, I'm the gatekeeper. And I don't care what the contract says, I don't care what we agreed to before you walked in this door. You've done the work, I've gotten your intellectual property, I've gotten your talents, and I'm not going to pay you the $50,000 that I promised you. I'm going to pay you $5,000 instead. And you're going to take this, you're going to keep it moving, and hopefully later on down the line, in a year or 2 or 3, I may return the favor if I feel like it, right? And that just seems to be the modus operandi, unless you're from some famous family and you have protection because of that. But in the instance that you fall into an issue concerning your compensation, you have under the federal statutes, the Fair Labor Standards Act, right? So if you're an employee, there's a certain threshold that employers are supposed to meet when it comes to compensation. Once you've worked, you're required to be paid for the work that you performed, period, full stop. If you're a salaried employee, then you're not entitled to overtime. But if you're not a salaried employee, then you may be entitled to overtime. I mean, there's so many different nuances to the legislation that I don't want to bore you with, because I can go on for hours talking about FLSA. But then you have state-specific statutes, right? Like New York State has New York labor law, right? And then you have New Jersey's wage payment law, right? And if the employer violates any of these, then you have penalties. So under the FLSA, Fair Labor Standards Act, the federal statute, double damages. So if your employer steals $100, they got to give you $200 plus 9% interest plus attorney's fees. Under New Jersey state, right? It's different, triple damages. So $300, 9% interest, attorney's fees, right? And it goes on and on and on, right? I talked about their failure to compensate you, even though you've had a contract going in. Then you have breach of contracts. Then you have fraud that might be attached to that, right? Penalties associated with fraud instead of New Jersey, 6 times damages, right? So you have 600%. So $100 stolen fraudulently, they got to pay you $600 plus attorney's fees, plus interest, plus all the other things, right? New York, very similar. I think it's triple damages. Federal, there is no statute, but there's just so many different laws that protects you as contractors, 1099, and employees, W-2, right? All I can say is, because it's very complicated, it could come across as complicated. Make sure that you document. Make sure that you record. Understand what your rights are. You do not need to have consent to record someone if your voice is on that recording. And there are only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, only 11 states in the United States and US territories that require the other person to consent. Only 11. The states are California, Connecticut, Florida, Illinois, Maryland, Massachusetts, Montana, Nevada, New Hampshire, Pennsylvania, and Washington. So everywhere else, you can record if your voice is on a recording, if you're part of the conversation without telling the other person that you're recording them. You can do it. CYA, cover your assets, okay? Make sure that you're protecting the things that you are working hard to accomplish and to achieve. Because if you don't do it, people will always have selective amnesia. They will always forget the conversation that you had in the coffee shop, or by the water cooler, or by wherever, or when you came to their office and complained. They're gonna forget it, because unless you can hit play or unless they have great integrity, which a lot of people don't have integrity nowadays, but unless you can hit play and have them hear their own words, they're going to deny, okay? Because again, they're covering their behinds. They're not trying to worry about doing the right thing and covering yours. Because if they were, then I wouldn't have a job, That
was so so helpful, so much knowledge that I actually did not know. Love your assets. That's great.
No, but You know what, there's another aspect to the recording thing as well, right? So if you're in the state of, let's say, California, and you're like, oh, well, California is only a 2 consent, blah, 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 I need it, blah, blah, blah. No. And the person that you're recording is in New York, federal law comes into play now, right? So if you're part of the conversation and the person is not in your state, you can record them without their consent, audio record them without their consent, because federal statute says one party consent. See what I'm saying? See how that works?
Yes.
You have federal statutes, state specific statutes, and in the state of California, you could record someone without their knowledge, only if you believe that they're committing a crime.
Okay, moving forward, strategies for creating safe spaces. So another question for all of the panelists: how can artists, professionals, and organizations actively contribute to creating safer and more inclusive spaces within the industry? What is a good solution in your head?
I'll start.
Okay, go ahead. Go ahead.
My bad. Go ahead, answer.
No. You are the representative and the spokesperson. I think you have the expertise in this one.
Definitely.
I was gonna say, I think it's definitely like that thing, see something, say something. You know, I think just in general, like beyond the music industry, I think a lot of people feel like, oh, it's not my business. And it's just like, that's just not true. Like, we are all social creatures, and you better hope that somebody would make it their business when it's you that is the victim of something. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think a lot of people feel like, oh, I don't want to get into the thing. And it's like, you don't have to get into the thing. We're not asking you to be a superhero. You see something, you say something. You see something weird, like Tyrone was talking about with, documenting, whether it be that you took a photo, you recorded, if you see something weird, don't just act like you didn't see it. If you don't feel safe, you remove yourself from the situation, but don't do nothing. I think that's the beginning, is like getting involved and not just turning a blind eye. Yeah.
But I also think that integrity plays a huge part of it as well. Like, I think we as human beings have to start recognizing that we all are interconnected. And until we see ourselves in as a collective and not this individualistic society that we've promoted, that it's much more challenging for people when they see something to say something. I think that there have been a lot of moments within the history of time where people have been victimized and brutalized. And the reason that has been able to continue is because those who are in more privileged positions don't speak up and speak out against it. And I think that it's going to take a collective approach for those people, and whether it's executive roles, and this is cross industry, that are in executive roles that aren't maybe as intimately involved in whatever that thing is, because power listens to power. I think what we see in these moments is that there's such a significant power differential that I don't have to listen to you. If it's a person from a power standpoint, I don't have to listen to your cries. I don't have to listen to how you feel about something, because I don't see you. I hate to say, I don't see you as human. I see you as my property. And I feel like this is a collective consciousness that where the chickens are kind of coming home to roost a little bit. And so I would like to see people in more privileged spaces speaking to those people who are also in those privileged spaces, saying, hey, this isn't right. And until that happens, I think it's going to be really hard to crack those walls and those ceilings, because power listens to power.
Very interesting. Alexa, what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, I completely agree with what you both said. I feel like I think as a society, the best that we can honestly do to make change is show up and get active in these spaces and not necessarily hide from them. But I agree that I think it is going to take people in more privileged positions to actually start showing up for people to go, oh, okay, now this is actually becoming a huge part of the conversation. And I agree. I think as long as people in the higher ups, like CEOs or HR, or, you know, let's say someone like Beyonce, when they're not approaching this type of conversation with honesty and support, then we're not going to see much change. So I think it is really important that, and, you know, for me personally, I do it through showing up at their buildings with a megaphone to start pushing these individuals into saying something about it. And so I think it is going to take those community pressure onto these powerful figures to get them to go, oh, okay, so now we've been pushed into a corner where we're going to have to say something. Like with this pledge, what Tiffany is doing, it's so important because we're seeing who isn't signing on. And that reflects more than the people that honestly are signing on. And so I think pressuring these individuals in certain tactics like the pledge, for example, is in the long run going to create change.
Absolutely. Definitely. There's all these different parts that people can play to eventually push, like you said, Sarita, these more powerful people into the direction of support for everybody. Tyrone.
So I just want to piggyback on what Sarita said. I think that, you know, her point was absolutely perfect. I think that, people who are in a position of power, from what I've learned, oftentimes are victims themselves. So the victims become the victimizer. And there's a German word for it where, I'm probably gonna butcher it, but it's like Schadenfreude, I think it's called, where you take pleasure in the pain of another. So it's easy to say, you know, I'm gonna go and complain, but if that person had to deal with sexual assault, you know, abuse, battery, all the other things, being passed around, right? When they're in their position of power and they see you coming up and then you're asking to be treated differently than they were treated, and they're looking at you like, why do you think you're better than me? Right? You're not, you know, they're not thinking, okay, well, I'm in a position of power and I'm now able to change this pattern and practice of behavior and to make things better for everyone that's coming in behind me. There's a lot of selfishness in the culture. And I get the see something and say something, but you also got to be careful with who you say something to. Because a lot of people that you think should be your advocate, or who are in a position of power to do something, probably have no desire to do it, right? You say you're gonna go to law enforcement, all right? Well, if you're in Atlanta and you go to law enforcement and there's a particular rapper who's friends with everyone in law enforcement and they come to his house and his parties and his barbecues and he sexually assaults you and you go to the chief of police, but guess what? The chief of police was just at his house 2 nights ago. He's not going to do anything. Okay, so you got to be really careful and mindful of what you do. Honestly, your best advocate is yourself, in my opinion. And you have to, again, same thing like you would do if you had an employer or an employment issue. You got to build your case before you come forward, all right? I'll give you an example. Let's say we're talking about sexual assault, right? It's a very crazy topic to discuss, but this is where I have the majority of my cases fall into this space. I always tell my clients who are referred to me early on in the process, this is what you should do. If ever you're assaulted, or if ever you're in a situation where you feel like you were drugged or something like that, go to the clinic the following day immediately, or go to the clinic within hours of you leaving, if you're able to, wherever the space is that you were harmed, right? Most clinics or most hospitals take government funds. So if you don't have health insurance, it doesn't matter. The government will pay for it. You want to get on record what happened to you, right? Blood work, You want to get your fingernails if you were fighting. You want to get the information underneath your fingernails removed. You want to have hair samples taken out because they can run tests on your hair samples to figure out what kind of drugs they put into your system. You want to get blood work done. If you can't get to the hospital right away, but you got to pee in a cup, pee in a bottle. You want your urine samples with you. You want everything. Take your underwear off, right? Clean yourself with it, put it in a Ziploc bag, save it for later if you don't feel like doing anything right away. You want to preserve as much evidence as you possibly can, because when you do decide, if you're not brave enough to do it right then and there, to come forward at a later date, you have everything you need to prove your point. You don't want to get into a he said, she said situation with someone that's very powerful, because they will use their money, their influence, and their resources to silence you and to discredit you. But if you got the evidence, they can't discredit evidence, right? Another thing that you need to do is to tell 5 to 7 people, anyone that you could think of that can retain the memory of this traumatic experience and this traumatic story that you have, right? So let's say you send a text message to a group of friends, your mama, your sister, your aunt, your cousin, whoever, right? Because the one thing that the law recognizes is called an excited utterance witness, right? So when you have just been traumatized, and after you call the police, if you decide to call the police, but if you don't, who you call? Your best friend, you call your mother, you call whatever. That person will hear the anxiety in your voice. They would hear your tears. They would hear the story, the horrific story, the horrific trauma that you just experienced, and they will never forget it. They will never forget it. They become like a human journal for you, right? You'll be surprised how many times I've had clients who was assaulted 30 years ago, but they ran to their best friend who was 16 at the time. They were 16. And that best friend remembers what they were wearing, where they were, what they were wearing themselves when they got the call, what room they were in, what the weather was like, all the things, all the details that the victim cannot remember, because a lot of times, if a victim takes time to come forward, they suppress the memory. They suppress the trauma. They try to run from it, right? Especially if they become a mother or a father, or they move on later on in life. I'm not the expert on this, Sarita, you are. So you can chime in and talk about, trauma and how people tend to mask and hide traumas. But a lot of times, from what I've experienced, survivors, they tend to mask their traumas. And it takes people who they've told in real time or throughout the years to recall exactly what happened to them if they haven't done a good job of keeping track of what occurred. So very long-winded way of saying, be your own advocate. Keep a log of all of all your evidence. Keep a log of all the things that has happened to you. It is great to think and to hope that people have integrity, and that the industry will change on its own, uniquely. But when you have industry guards who are now being sued left and right, blocking and tackling, and preventing you from, just doing your art because they have some stupid sick fetish, the only way that you can protect yourself is through self-protection, in my opinion. So.
Absolutely. One more question within this space, and we have covered it a little bit. Alexa had mentioned protesting. Tiffany has the pledge with 100%ers. In what other ways can artists be proactive, and music industry and professionals be proactive in playing a driving meaningful change and advocating for safer spaces in the music industry? What other things can they physically do?
Can I answer this one? Use
Absolutely.
use their platforms. I can't remember who it was that was talking about privilege. Who was it? Sarita? Was it Sarita?
Mhm.
I mean, obviously, the bigger the platform, the bigger the reach. Like Alexa mentioned the Safe Music Business Pledge that we have going on right now. I mean, there's so many people that come across my Instagram and 100%ers Instagram that I know have seen, some of the content. And it's like, you know, resharing the stuff. Like, you don't even have to make it up. Just repost it, you know, replatform it. And get involved and not be afraid to have the hard conversations. You know what I mean? It's like, the reality is these are things that happen. It's no secret that the music industry is trifling. So like, I mean, I think getting comfortable with being uncomfortable and being able to have these kind of conversations is important. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you so
Mhm.
much. Navigating unsafe spaces. So question for Sarita. How does exposure to unsafe or toxic work environments impact individuals' mental health and well-being?
Tremendously. I mean, I think that anyone that is a creative and that has been in these spaces can attest to how their mental health has been really yeah, I guess challenge is a good word in certain spaces in times of their lives. And I think it looks different for everyone. There are people who have a level of, so this is going to be a little bit controversial. I think when you are a person that, I always say that the record business or creative spaces, you don't choose them, they kind of choose you, like especially the business of music. You know, maybe not being a songwriter, like that's a gift that's given to you by the divine. But the business of music is a completely different space. The business of entertainment is a completely different thing outside of art. It's a business. And so I think that many creatives do not and are not prepared to take their art and put it in a business environment with business people who don't necessarily have artistic abilities. And I think that is one of the defining differences between the music business and the business of music. And people get into it thinking that it's going to be one way and it's a completely different way, because the people who are are running it are typically lawyers. No offense, Tyrone, but they're typically people who have very little creative aspects to their being. Um, and and it tends to be a distinct conflict. So when you have a person that is open and is a creative, and they have to interact and engage with someone who is a business person, um, there's a lot of trauma that can come with it, because you're not ready. You're not ready for what the business of music means. The contracts. I can't tell you how many artists have never read their whole entire contract. And if you're a person that's in the business of music, that's by design. You want to put the jargon and the language and all of that to confuse creatives. It's not meant to be just cut and dry. So even coming in the gate, just wanting to put out your art, you're met with something that is completely unartistic, if that's even a word. So I want us to really be able to hold that space, that just entering the business of music is already traumatic, because many
Mhm.
creatives are not prepared and they don't prepare themselves for what it has to offer. And you can't, because there's a lot of BS that comes with it, that even once you get through, you're like, oh, I really didn't sign up for this. Um, so there's an amount of anxiety, because as an artist, Erica said it best, I'm an artist and I'm sensitive about my shit. And you then have people who are constantly critiquing and picking apart every verse, every beat, all of these things for people who are already highly um, sensitive in and of themselves. So this dynamic that is created is to really cut a person down that is a creative, instead of uplifting them, just by the pure structure of the business of music. or the business of entertainment, because it's the same with actors and actresses. You're going into places where they're telling you you're not good. You're not good for this part. You're not good for this role. This song isn't for you. You know, all of these things. And so I take off my hat to people and I commend creatives, because you guys unknowingly put yourself in these really brutal environments, and it takes a toll on the way you feel about yourself. It takes a toll on your mental capacity, what you can actually hold, your depressive states. It's just so much. I'm going to start my ramble, but there's a lot of ways that creatives are impacted in the business of music, in the business of entertainment, that I wish we could help more understand.
Absolutely. And even just to piggyback off of what you've been saying, a lot of us have been doing this our entire lives. Like it's something, you know, given to us from birth. And so we start very young. Even looking at how a lot of talent is acquired today, it's like through TikTok. It's a lot of these 16-year-olds from the Midwest who have no idea what is what. And so a lot of the trauma starts fairly young for us. Even for myself, a lot of the things that have been said or done to me happened when I was a teenager, just getting started in this. So it's you carry a lot for a long time.
And there is no backup plan. Like many creatives don't have a plan B. It's like, yo, this is all I got. I am putting all my eggs in this basket. Whereas for, say, myself or Tyrone, it's like, all right, if I didn't become a therapist, I could have done something else. Like I have skills and talents to do something else. I'm sure it's the same for Tyrone. Like if we didn't pass our respective licensing, we could have figured out something else. When you are given a gift and that gift is your whole being, and you make the decision to pursue it, you pursue it with all your might. So there is no plan B. If this shit don't work out, I'm working at Vons. No shades of Vons, but like, so I think there's also a pressure that comes with that. And then heaven forbid you start making a little bit of money and you start having to, say, feed your family. Then that is a completely different layer, because now your art becomes your work.
Right.
And that is a whole other barrel of monkeys around, you know, the pressures and the anxieties and the depressions that come with that. Because now it's, I gotta make this work. I got mouths to feed. I got mortgages to pay. And so I think that also contributes to why people don't say anything. It's like, I can't mess up my bread and butter. I don't have nothing else, I don't have anything else to fall back on. So and predators know that.
Yep.
I'm gonna step off my soapbox.
It's a good soapbox to be question for Tiffany and Alexa. Can you share a personal experience highlighting the importance of creating safe spaces for artists to collaborate and create?
You
Go
first.
first?
You go first.
Okay, so I'll share just a personal experience that has happened to me, that I've actually never shared before. So the reason why I spoke about the like drugs and all of that, when it comes to the studio, is because I've experienced a situation being in the studio, where I was given a joint that was laced with something. I'm not sure what it was. All I know is after I smoked, I started to like just lose control of my body, my body. And I don't really like remember too much about that night outside of like the color of the studio. I remember like trying to, you know, leave. I drove home. I was all over the road. But like, you know, like that's one of like too many circumstances that I've been in creative spaces, where if safety was built into the, or like baked into the cake, as they would say, if like there were things that were baked into the cake, maybe may have not found myself in that situation. And maybe other people, I mean, it's so common, unfortunately. You know, I think that sex, drugs, and rock and roll is like so much a big part of the culture. Like music is such a, at least in my experience, I could be tripping, but music is like hypersexual. Like the music industry is hypersexual. It's very wild and whatever. And so I think that like because there's no like I was saying earlier, there's like a lack of professionalism. So there's circumstances you end up in because you're not in a professional setting. Like would I have smoked something that was laced if there were more consequences, if this was something that was in the front? Maybe not. Maybe, I mean, because people ain't shit. But you know, I think that like, yeah, there's it's like it's not even thought. Like it's not like, oh, let's make sure the room is safe. It's like, nah, let's make sure the vibe is set and we got all our things that make everything fun and make everything this, that, and the third. And Tyrone said something earlier where he was talking about people not, you know, trusting you if you don't partake in the thing, right? Like I smoke weed, but I don't drink, I don't do any other, you know, drugs like that make me go out of my mind where I can't remember. That was my first experience with doing with like experiencing something like that where I didn't remember. And I feel like that's just super unfortunately common. It just is super common. And so I feel like, you know, like I said, if there was something that was you know, people always say like, oh, we need a union, like if I had somewhere to go, if there was someone in charge that dealt with these kind of things, I don't know, maybe my experience would be different. But sorry if that was heavy, y'all, but that was one of my personal experiences.
It was really honest and real and genuine. I think everyone has had something of some level to that who's been
Yeah.
involved in music for, you know, at least a moment, which is
Yeah.
relatable but unfortunate.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Alexa?
I have also, I mean, there have been so many different experiences that I have had within not only the music industry, but also television, film industry, where horrible things happened. Horrible things happened that altered my life forever. And, you know, just thinking about the importance of safety just makes me think about my children, makes me think about the future where two things end up happening to people that are harmed in unsafe environments. One, they end up either like leaving the thing that they love because they choose their safety over the thing that they love. And then they end up having that sadness that they carry with them forever, honestly. When you have to leave something that you love because something is unsafe, I think that is unforgivable that anyone would ever allow someone to have to leave because it's unsafe. So that's one. And then the second is that the other thing that ends up happening is they get punished. If someone speaks up about the environment being unsafe, then what ends up happening is they get fired. They don't work again. And the people that aren't speaking up on behalf of the fact that it's, you know, an unsafe environment, they're the ones who keep getting jobs. And, you know, what kind of message does that send in the long run? It's either you have to leave the thing you love or get punished and have to be basically kicked out of the environment that you actually do want to be in if it was safe. And so I think leaving people with two options like that is just detrimental to our society, because that just isn't even whatsoever morally sound.
Absolutely. Sarita, what are some signs or symptoms that individuals should be aware of, indicating that they may be experiencing mental health issues related to their work environment? What are things they can look out for?
I think first and foremost, if you, in thinking about a particular studio, a particular artist, a particular producer, whomever, engineer, if the thought of them gives you anxiety, then you have probably been traumatized and as a result of something that's happened. I think our bodies really tell us a great deal. And unfortunately, when people have been in these situations, they tend to feel uncomfortable listening to those parts of themselves anymore. It's almost like it kind of gets beat out of you. Your intuition gets beat out of you the more and more you're in these situations where trauma and unsafety happen. Um, I think we really need to do a better job in supporting artists and supporting people with reconnecting them to their bodies and to themselves, because there is a dissociation that happens each time for many people each time they're faced with an unsafe environment or a trauma. There's a dissociation that happens. And so, really being able to pay attention to what your body is saying. If when you go into an environment and you start to get butterflies, or you start to sweat, or your heart starts to beat, those are indicators that you have been in this space where you have felt unsafe. I think also anger and rage is a really great indicator as well. If the thought of somebody brings you to want to fight, you should probably stay away from that person if you can. Um, that I think that we just what I support people in doing is just, how can we connect you back to your body? How can we connect you back to the parts of you that have been taken in these circumstances, in these situations? But yeah, as much as we can listen to what our body is saying, um, rage, anxiety, sweats, um, uh, agitation is another one. I'm like just getting really familiar with those feelings, and when does your body experience those feelings?
Mm. With that, are there any coping strategies or resources that you could recommend to someone who finds himself in this kind of situation or in a hostile work environment?
Um, I think Tyrone did a really good job in saying relying on self. I'm always going to be an advocate for therapy. And what I attempt to do is like, okay, how do we create enough tools, as many tools in your toolbox as you need to navigate each of these interactions? Because I think that it's inappropriate to ask someone, well, just don't go back. And I think that's what's been happening, is that people are like, well, if you're in an unsafe environment, it's your responsibility. You can just leave. You can just decide not to go back. And it's like, okay, when was the last time you just left your job with your toxic boss? Because, or that person that's been harassing you, when did you decide to leave? But for whatever reason, we don't think of creatives in the same way. We're like, it's come back into the news with the Harvey Weinstein trial being overturned. And it's like, well, why didn't those people just say something? Why didn't they just leave? Or why didn't they fight back? And it's like, okay, there's a whole lot of things at play that create environments and dynamics. So you can't just do that. So I try to arm people with as enough tools in their toolbox to create resilience in the moments of distress. You know, what is it that we need to do? Who do we need to put in place? Is it deep breathing strategies? Is it smash rooms? Is it, you know, where we are journaling more? Are we, you know, what are the things that we're putting in place? Because it's asinine to ask someone to just leave the environment because they're uncomfortable. Sometimes we have to be tolerant of, and this is an awful thing to say, and I feel bad saying it as a clinician, but sometimes we have to just create the space of being uncomfortable and upping our resilience and being and feeling what being uncomfortable and discomfort feels like. Because as you're able to create a threshold for yourself, you're able to navigate it a little bit differently when your resilience is higher. Because not every situation we're going to be able to just get out of, unfortunately. And it sucks to even say that. I feel sick saying that.
I think that it is so true, though, that every situation is situational, and having those tools and coping mechanisms to get to a place where you are safe and you are able to, I mean, a lot of this is survival as well. So that all makes a lot of sense.
Until we're able to change things, there are circumstances where you are forced to survive.
Absolutely. My next question is for Tyrone. When should creatives or music professionals seek legal assistance regarding unsafe work environments?
Well, I think that, well, first things first, know which lawyer you're going to, right? So if you're an artist or if you're a writer or any kind of creative, don't run to the lawyer that's being recommended by the label. I'm telling you, they work for the label. You might write a little check to them, but the check you're writing pales in comparison to the check that the label is writing them. Trust and believe. It's kind of like going to human resources, okay? Do not go to the lawyer that the label recommends. I'm warning you. I could probably name 5 of them that I know who represent a lot of artists and a lot of creatives, and they don't represent their client's best interest. Their client is really the label. Warning you, do not go to the attorney who the label or the network, whomever recommends you to go to help you with negotiating your contract or to help you with dealing with issues. And if you do go to them because you feel compelled, record. Why? Because in a couple of years or months or however long, when you realize they screwed you, you signed a bad contract, they advised you or they did not advise you on certain things that they were supposed to advise you on, then you can turn around and sue them for the value of the money that you lost in malpractice, okay? You can go back and sue those exact same lawyers that the industry labels advise you to retain. You can go back and sue them for malpractice. They all have malpractice insurance. The cap is like $100 million, like $20 million sometimes, okay? You can go back and you can get all the money that they screwed you out of because they gave you bad advice, all right? But record them. Record every conversation, all right? And when you record, here's what I advise. Put your phone on airplane mode. If your boss or someone asks you to come into their office, say, you know what? I was just gonna go to the restroom. Give me a minute. Go to the restroom, go into a stall, put your phone on airplane mode, hit record from the stall. Walk to the office, go inside, close the door, then have the conversation. Even if it's in a restaurant. Oh, shoot, you know what? I gotta use the potty. Give me a minute. Same concept. Go to the restroom, in the stall, airplane mode, record, come back. Why airplane mode? Because you don't want someone to call you because then it stops the recording. See what I'm saying? And you can't just pull your phone out and hit record again when you're sitting in front of the person who is advising you inappropriately. Okay, so that's my little word of advice on that. And when it comes to these lawyers who the industry recommends, there's something in the law for certain states called the date of discovery rule, right? So the date that you discovered that you were harmed is when the clock begins to run for your statute of limitations. Okay? What is the statute of limitations? The time frame that you have to sue that worthless ass lawyer who gave you bad advice because they work for the fucking label. All right? So the window of time that you have to sue them begins to run when you learn that you got screwed. So be mindful of that. New York has 2.5 years. New Jersey is the date of the discovery rule. They have 2 years as well, or 3 years, I think it is. They might have changed it. California has different rules. Every state has their own rules. But a lot of states have what's called the date of discovery rule, meaning that the date that you discovered you were harmed is when the clock starts to run on when you can actually sue those lawyers for malpractice, okay? So that's the second thing I want to share. When should you come forward and say something to a lawyer? I mean, I prefer people to come to me from the first instance, right? So if you know that someone done grabbed your ass and you got to go back and meet with them, call me. Let me know, because I will hatch a plan to set their asses up moving forward, okay? I believe in planning. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. So you need to make sure that you know what you're doing if someone is harassing you, assaulting you, or whatever it is, or treating you or putting you in an environment that makes you feel uncomfortable. Sarita gave a lot of great points about having resilience, and she talked about being able to be uncomfortable. You can be uncomfortable, but you have to have a plan. You have to have a plan, okay? Don't walk into a space, like for instance, I worked on Wall Street for this bank. Absolutely hated it, hated my job, but I had a plan. Had a racist boss, had a racist boss's boss, but I had a plan. I learned everything that I had to learn about employment litigation, and I recorded everything. And right when I had enough, I complained, but I already had what? My FU file. And it was very thick. It was 4 years thick of information plus recordings. Okay? They offered me $10,000 to leave, ended up paying me $250,000 2 years later or a year later. Okay? That is what an FU plan produces. And that also is about being uncomfortable, but also having a plan in that uncomfortability, right? So that's the second point I want to make about when you should go and find an attorney, and make sure that you know what attorney you're gonna get. Don't go get some general practitioner who takes whatever comes through the friggin' door, okay? Because they don't know, half of the time they don't know what the hell they're doing. They're just taking your case, they're charging you a couple of dollars to pay their bills for that month, all right? And then when you can't pay no more, they abandon the case and then you're on your own. And this time you're sexually assaulted, you're harassed, you're depressed, the contract has been breached, and now you're even poorer than when you were a few months before, a few weeks before, when the incident initially occurred, right? Go to someone who specializes in the area that of harm that you have suffered, right? If you know that they breached your contract or they committed fraud against you, go to a contracts lawyer. If you know that someone sexually assaulted you, go to someone that specializes in sexual assaults. It's about they groped you, they grabbed you, they did whatever. That's who you go to. If you know it's an employment issue, go to an employment lawyer, a plaintiff's employment lawyer, right? If you know that someone has committed malpractice, medical and or legal or anything, go to a malpractice attorney. That's who you go to. Don't go to some general practitioner with a sign on the corner of their house who does everything, including notary and all the other things, and try to get some legal services from them, because they'll ask you for a $10,000 retainer. When that gets to zero, if you can't re-up, they say bye-bye. And another thing, if you got a good case, you shouldn't have to pay a retainer. No lawyer should ask you to pay anything if you got a good case, because they're gonna get their money in the back end anyway, right? Like if you have a solid case against XYZ and your evidence is through the roof, I'm talking about like you got medical, you got witnesses, you got everything, right? Dates, times, you got metadata from your cell phone showing that you were at this place at this time, like you said it was, and there's nothing that the defendant can say to defend against that. All they should be saying is, hey, listen, sign this retainer agreement. I'm gonna take a third or 40% or whatever it is. We can figure it out, and that's it. But if they say pay $5,000 or $10,000 down, and when this money becomes 50%, you got to re-up again. You got to think twice about that. Okay, because that means your case is probably not as strong as you think it is, and they're just trying to fill their pockets and not really try to help you. Okay. Yeah. So go. See, that's a very long-winded way of saying, whenever you're harmed, as soon as you're harmed, contact an attorney who specializes in the area of where you were harmed. If that lawyer is worth his weight in salt, he will provide you with a plan. If you don't have enough right away to execute, he provides you with a plan on how to build up a case. I built cases out of nothing, okay? Like nothing. I've taken a $50,000 case and made it $1 million case, like that. But it's about coming, and it's about planning. You got to plan. Fail to plan, you plan to fail.
So much incredible information there that I had no idea about, but I'm so glad that I do now. So thank you so much for that, Tyrone. Now I'm going to open it up to a Q&A that were pre-submitted questions from our audience. So I'm going to start reading through these, and if any of our panelists want to contribute an answer, would love that. The first question is, how are the major labels responding to the Safe Music Business Pledge? I feel like that's a Tiffany question.
Yeah, that's definitely a big question. They're not. That's the answer.
Some are. Not majors.
LVRN.
Thank you.
Yes, LVRN. There are record labels that have taken the pledge, but the big three that I think everyone's thinking about when it comes to the music groups, which is Universal, Sony, Warner, none of them have taken the pledge. And you know, like Alexa said earlier, I think the pledge, it's not even it's more about who didn't take it than it is about who took it, because I think like people's inaction shows what's important to them. So far, no major labels. If you would like to see a label take it though, please visit the 100%ers website. Go to click right at the top, there's a banner that says the Safe Music Business Initiative. Click it, click the Safe Music Business Pledge, and there is a button that says challenge companies to take the pledge. So if you want to challenge somebody to take the pledge, whether it's a record label, publishing company, PRO, studios, we don't have any studios yet either. Please do. It's an email template that you can copy and paste into your email and send it to whoever it is that you want to send it to.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Absolutely.
What are some tangible actions the community can take to create a system of support that combats and works just as well as the current system of abuse?
I feel like we kind of answered that already a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be, you know, to create a system of support to combat the system of abuse. You're gonna have to really band together all the songwriters, all the producers, and say, listen, you know what? Unless you do this, unless you change this, we're not gonna be working for your favorites, right? Because a lot of times, these artists who seems to be at the forefront, they can't write anything, they can't produce anything. Okay, they need the Tiffany's and the others to step up to the plate and to do the work behind the scenes in order to provide them with that hit song. All they could do is just deliver the lyrics and deliver it with some emotion a lot of the times. A lot of times they don't do the work themselves. So if everyone comes together, I mean, listen, there's more strength in numbers. They say, listen, you know what? If you're not going to really make this change, then we're not going to give you our talents. then you force their hands, right? But you know, I think anything short of that, I don't see how any change is going to come unless you have like, you know, some like major star start their own thing, use their own money, and then house all the talents, and you know, put up a huge fight against these major labels. You know, just to touch on what Tiffany was saying earlier, regarding the big three not joining her pledge. Well, you know, they're part of the problem. They focus on their bottom line. They're not concerned about doing the right thing. They're concerned about making sure that their shareholders are satisfied.
Absolutely. One piece of the community I don't know if we've quite addressed is consumers, because we have our artists, our creatives, and we have our business, but also our consumers. So with Quiet on Set, I know that created so much buzz with people who are media consumers and fans. And I know Tiffany's experience with K-pop. K-pop fans are so intense. So I think also challenging people who consume can be really scary to the people on top, because if there's no one buying, or if there are people lashing out who are consumers, it's a good way to push people in the right direction as well.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that, because I think with cancel culture, it's become kind of this hashtag more than it is a reality. And really what I feel like we need the consumers to understand is, do you want to financially reward abuse? That's really the question at the end of the day. And so when people are like, oh, you know, let's separate the artist from the art. Yeah, but no, because you have to understand that the money that you're giving the predator, they're going to use that on lawyers, on this, on that, to silence their victims, to perpetuate the abuse. And then you now are somewhat complicit in that because you're funding it. And so it's like, instead of funding a predator, maybe give it to 100%ers. You know, those things will actually, you know, that will actually change. But I feel like people, especially millennials, Z generation, it's this whole cancel culture thing. Like, oh, do we really want to cancel? It's like, it doesn't even exist anyways, cancel culture. These predators don't even get canceled. They just get moved around, just like the Catholic Church did to priests for over like decades long. It's the same thing is still happening within the music industry. They don't cancel them. They just move them around, and then they get access to more and more victims. And so really, we're not combating cancel culture. What we need to realize, especially when we're consumers, is, do we want to financially reward abuse? People that abuse people? No, we don't, because also then the predator starts to realize that they're almost unstoppable, that nothing can happen to them no matter what they do, because there's people there supporting them, financing them, and allowing them to silence their victims. And so you made a very good point. The consumers do have a huge role to play in all of this. And I think it's important for them to understand how detrimental their role really is, actually.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
So we have a couple more questions. I know we've run a little bit over, but a couple more questions and then our closing statements. What are some, let's see, what laws are currently in place to protect private contractors, i.e. producers and songwriters, to protect them from harassment or unsafe conditions in the workplace? I feel this might be a Tyrone question.
Yeah,
I think answered that, didn't he?
yeah. I think I asked that earlier.
Yes.
Even as a contractor, that word is a little funny, right? So that's a 1099 employee. There are certain rules around that, and a lot of companies they rely on freelancers to not be aware of what their rights are when it comes to that, right? And how they're classified. I know in New York, you can't be a free, you know, they have a freelancer isn't free law, essentially, right? Meaning that you can't have someone listed as a freelancer into perpetuity and then have them working for you for 3 years in a row and then not giving them the normal employer benefits, right? So exactly. So
I didn't know that.
if your employer is telling you, okay, be here at 9 o'clock, you gotta leave at 5 o'clock, your lunch is at 1 o'clock, right? Here's a company card, with our name on it, your name on it. Doesn't say freelancer, but it says writer, right? Let's say that, let's say that that's your role. You get a company email, you get a company card, you get a company car, all these different things. And we're controlling how you're supposed to move and go. You have no autonomy to make any decisions based on your own personal schedule. Then guess what? You're not a freelancer, you're an employee. You are an employee, okay? So you have to be cognizant of misclassification. Okay, a lot of employers will use the fact that you're creative, and like Sarita said earlier, you're creative. Your focus is only focused on doing your thing, right? Which is your art, right? You don't care about all the business and all the nuances surrounding that. That's where the boring lawyers like me come in, right? So you need to be mindful of how you're being treated, and make sure that you're not being misclassified, because there are a lot of benefits that you're going to be losing, and there are a lot of rights and laws that you're entitled to, due to misclassification. Like I had a case where I'm not going down this rabbit hole, but I can give you tons of examples, tons of
Can I ask
examples.
a question? Can I ask you a question, Tyrone?
Mhm.
If you are misclassified, what do you do about it? Like, how do you remedy that situation? Because I mean, I think that it's quite common in the music industry. So what should you do?
Well, the thing is, California has really good misclassification laws, as well as New York, right? I think what you do is you just keep track of your hours, right? New York has something called the learned professional exemption, meaning that if you're a lawyer, a psychiatrist, a licensed social worker, a registered nurse, a dentist, an accountant, right? Those group of professionals who have to take a state license to pass in order to practice, they're not entitled to overtime, right? No matter what their base salary is, right? Could be $50,000, could be $100,000.
Sarita. Sorry,
Can't get
girl.
no overtime, right?
Yeah.
But if you don't fall into one of those learned professionals, if you're not a learned professional, you're entitled to overtime, unless you sign. And then there's certain documents that you're required to sign, and notifications that you're required to be provided, to let you know what your hourly rate is, what your time and a half rate is. If you're salaried, then you need to sign a little exemption saying that you essentially volunteer to not get any overtime. A lot of people don't know this. And the employers don't say anything, right? So just to answer your question, keep track of your hours. Easy way to do it, when you're leaving, and you might be able to get compensated while you're on your way to work, right? So people don't even know that. If you're sitting in a car or on the train and you're answering an email or you're responding to a text from the boss, or if you're in the bathroom brushing your teeth and your boss sent you a text from the night before and you're responding to it at 6 o'clock in the morning, the clock starts then. That's when the clock starts. From your bathroom, on the toilet, that's when the clock starts. Okay, it doesn't start when you go to the office and you clock in. It starts when you start working. If I gotta answer your text, and I gotta answer your email, and if I don't, you get pissed and retaliate against me, your ass gonna pay me from the minute I hit send until the minute my head hits the pillow, if that's the kind of work day that I have, right? So you can be compensated from the bathroom to the boardroom, all right? That time in between, the travel time, all of that, you can be compensated for, right? So what I would recommend is, if you know you're gonna start your day, send yourself an email, or send your boss an email like, hey, good morning, I'm on my way. They thinking that you're being polite, but what you're doing is keeping track of your time.
Smart.
Keeping track of your time. Because the thing is, once you, like I said before, when you ring the bell, you can't ring it. HR has, and the thing is, you don't have access to the data and to the emails and to all that other stuff on the back end, right? All you have access is to the stuff that you have, like your phone and all that stuff, right? Another thing that I wanted to share that I didn't say earlier, do not forward yourself any company documents, right? So like if you have an email from the company that or some Slack conversation, where you're being disrespected, don't forward it to your personal email, because that's a misuse of company property. Instead, print that shit and bring it home. Put it in your pocket, print it and bring it home, right? They could terminate you for misuse of company property because all emails belong to them, right? Or record the screen so you can have a picture or a recording of the email. If you don't feel safe or feel comfortable with printing because they monitor how many sheets of paper you print or what document was printed, right? There's so many things so many nuances to the law and to the rules and how you can do things to protect yourself to build that FU file, right? Yeah, send yourself a text message early in the morning, monitor your hours, keep working, and if you feel like you're being misclassified, complete the project, go to a labor and employment attorney with all of your text messages and emails showing that you started at 6 o'clock in the morning and you ended at 9 p.m. at night, right? And you have all your stuff, and they can't refute it. You just can't, right? Because time and a half starts at 40 plus hours a week, right? And then if you're working into the night, there's nighttime differential, there's like weekend pay. There's a whole, I mean, I could go on for hours. There's a ton of things that you don't know that you're probably entitled to, right?
Can I ask a quick question here? Do you mind if I was trying to raise my hand? I don't know if anybody saw this. Hi, everybody. Maria Lyons. I am the managing director for the 100%ers. I also am Tiffany's day-to-day manager, along with Rose, who's also the director on this call. Tyrone, to speak to that point, is this something that songwriters, producers, and artists would go to their publisher to make that claim? Because that's basically who they are working with if they're not signed to a record label, because most of these people are not, an employee of a company per se, maybe the creatives. So where would you go if you want to make that type of claim?
I would say look at who signed your check. If the check goes to if the check goes from the label to the publisher and the publisher then pays you, if that's how it goes, I'm not sure, right? That's the person, that person on that check is your employer, right? If you're being told to show up at the studio at 6 p.m., but you're not leaving till 6 a.m., okay, that's 12 hours. And suppose the project is a year. And then you got to board a plane and fly out and do this and do that and then do all these different things.
Yeah.
That's hours that you're entitled to. That's money that you're entitled to. In New York, there's something called the joint against whoever's name is on that check that deposited that check into your account.
Suit?
In New York. Yes, the misclassification, because So here's the thing. In New York, there's something called the joint employer doctrine. What does that mean, right? So you have, let's say that Tiffany works for 100%ers. 100%ers then contracts with Sarita's company to do something, right? Tiffany is being disrespectful. This is all hypothetical to Maria in Sarita's shop. Sarita's shop is located in the state of New York. Sarita's walking around. She doesn't realize that Tiffany is calling, Maria some sort of, discriminatory term, right? Like the N-word or something like that, right? Mm-hmm. Maria can then turn around, sue Tiffany, sue 100%ers, and sue Sarita. You know why? Because the offense occurred in Sarita's shop, and as a joint employer, she had a duty and obligation to ensure that Tiffany was not violating Maria's employment law rights, right? So that's how you can possibly get some justice from the label, right? If you used like a I forgot what you called it. I think it's a publisher or whatever.
Yeah.
One of the companies to do the work.
First and foremost, I want to thank all of our panelists today. Everyone had such incredible insight. I've learned some things that I'm going to put in my back pocket as far as the law goes, thanks to Tyrone. A lot of mental health tools, thanks to Sarita. Alexa and Tiffany have absolutely given some beautiful personal insight from their experiences working in the industry in general. So I wanted to thank all of our panelists and like give you guys a round of applause because it is not an easy conversation, but such an important conversation. And I wanted to know if any of our panelists had any final thoughts they would like to share, reflections in creating a safe space in the music industry.
I just want to say one more time to go to the 100%ers website, visit our Safe Music Business Initiative, click around. There's a survey that's anonymous that you can take. There's the Safe Music Business Pledge if you want your publisher or label, anybody like that to take it. Again, you can click that challenge companies to take the pledge. And I just want to say thank you all for being here and thank you for continuing to support the 100%ers and our endeavors.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you so much for having me here.
Absolutely.
Really.
Yeah, for sure. And I would say closing, just be the change that you want to see in the world. Like it really starts with us. And because sometimes this can feel like really, really big. These challenges that we're talking and we're advocating. So just start with yourself and let that emanate and let that spread to the people in which you come into contact with. And I think that's how we're going to navigate through this successfully.
Love that. Love that.
Oh, it's me?
Oh.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I mean, listen, I guess what I would say is, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And you have to protect yourself. That's it. Record. Make sure that your FU file is thicker on the person that you're going against than their file is on you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, everybody. Be sure to click the bio link in 100%ers profile so you can sign that pledge and learn more. And thank you to everyone who spoke today and participated in this panel.